there is a specific kind of testimony that is difficult to dismiss. Not one person, not two. Hundreds of former inmates, across decades, across different facilities, across different sentences, describing the same things in the same language. People who do not know each other. People who were incarcerated years apart. People who have no reason to coordinate their accounts. And then there are the officials, who have been asked about these accounts, who have responded, whose responses follow a specific pattern. The thing being described does not happen, has never happened, is not permitted to happen. The official response is consistent. The former inmate accounts are also consistent. Both groups are saying the same thing every time they are asked. They are saying opposite things. In this video, we count down 14 things that former Japanese inmates consistently report that current officials consistently deny. Stay with me to the end, because thing number 1 is something that the United Nations has asked Japan about directly, more than once. So hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and let us begin. Former inmates consistently describe the morning routine as a psychological instrument rather than an administrative procedure. The sequence, wake, signal, position, assumption, count, inspection, is described as conducted in a specific way designed to establish hierarchical relationship before any other interaction of the day. The speed required, the posture required, the silence required, and the specific consequences of deviation are described with consistency across accounts spanning decades. Officials describe the morning routine as a welfare procedure designed to confirm inmate safety. The first 72 hours of Japanese detention are described by former inmates as the period of most intensive psychological pressure, the period during which the institution establishes the framework within which all subsequent experience will occur. Former inmates describe specific techniques used in this period that the institution's official account does not acknowledge as part of any procedure. Officials describe the intake period as an orientation process. Japanese prison regulations permit communication between inmates in designated circumstances. Former inmates consistently describe a reality in which communication outside those circumstances is subject to consequences that the official regulatory framework does not acknowledge. The specific consequences described, immediate cell restriction, meal reduction, extended isolation, are described with consistency across accounts from different facilities and different periods. Officials describe the silence rule as a safety and order measure with standard administrative consequences for violation. Former inmates describe the enforcement of the silence rule as the primary instrument of institutional control, not because of the rule itself, but because of the specific way enforcement is conducted. The discretionary nature of enforcement, as described by former inmates, means that the rule functions not as a consistent prohibition, but as a tool that can be applied selectively, creating a specific psychological dynamic that the official account does not acknowledge as a feature of how the rule operates. Japanese prison regulations guarantee medical access to inmates. Former inmates consistently describe the medical access they received as different from the guaranteed access in ways that the official account does not acknowledge. The specific descriptions include delays between symptom report and medical evaluation measured in days rather than hours, medical evaluations conducted through cell doors rather than in medical facilities, and treatment decisions made by non-medical personnel in the first instance. Officials describe the medical access system as compliant with regulatory requirements. The United Nations Committee Against Torture has noted in its periodic reviews of Japan that the medical access conditions in Japanese detention facilities require clarification. The Japanese government's responses to these notes describe the system as compliant. Former inmates describe specific instances of their own medical situations that they characterize as inconsistent with the compliance the official account describes. Japanese prison food provision is documented in official standards that specify caloric content, nutritional requirements, and meal composition. Former inmates consistently describe the actual provision as below the specified standards in ways that the official account does not acknowledge. The specific descriptions include caloric content below stated levels, preparation methods that reduce nutritional value from specified ingredients, and portion sizes that the official standard describes as adequate and former inmates describe as insufficient. Officials describe food provision as meeting regulatory standards. The consistency of the description across former inmate accounts from different facilities and different decades is notable because the discrepancy described is specific and measurable. Caloric content and portion size are quantifiable in a way that more subjective institutional conditions are not. Former inmates who describe the food provision consistently use specific measurements and comparisons that align with each other while diverging from the official standard documentation. Japanese law guarantees inmates access to legal counsel. Former inmates consistently describe the actual access they received as different from the guaranteed access in specific ways the official account does not acknowledge. The descriptions include legal consultation conducted in spaces where conversations could be observed by prison staff, communication with legal counsel subject to delays that the official framework does not acknowledge as occurring, and specific instances where legal counsel was informed of scheduled visits by prison administration before inmates were informed. Officials describe legal access as compliant with constitutional and regulatory guarantees. The Japan Federation of Bar Associations has documented concerns about legal access conditions in Japanese detention facilities in reports that describe specific conditions inconsistent with the official compliance characterization. The government's responses to these reports maintain compliance. Former inmates and their legal counsel describe specific instances that they characterize as inconsistent with the compliance described. Former inmates consistently describe correspondence being withheld without notification to sender or recipient, not occasionally, but as a regular institutional practice affecting a significant proportion of correspondence. The official framework acknowledges that correspondence may be withheld on specific grounds. Former inmates describe the grounds as broader in practice than documented, and the notification as absent in practice despite being required. Family communication restrictions described by former inmates include visit durations shorter than officially specified, specific topics prohibited in visits that are not listed in the official prohibited topics, documentation, and physical conditions of visit facilities that former inmates characterize as designed to make communication difficult rather than facilitate it. Officials describe family communication as provided in accordance with regulatory requirements. Both descriptions are consistent. Both have been produced repeatedly. They describe incompatible realities of the same institutional provisions. Japanese prison cell lighting conditions are specified in regulatory documentation that sets minimum and maximum illumination levels for different periods of the day and night. Former inmates consistently describe the actual lighting conditions as different from the specified standards in ways that the official account does not acknowledge. The specific descriptions include continuous lighting during designated dark periods at levels that prevent normal sleep, and the use of lighting adjustment as a behavioral management tool outside the official regulatory framework. Officials describe cell lighting as provided in accordance with regulatory specifications. Sleep disruption through lighting management is documented in the literature on coercive institutional practices. Former Japanese inmates describe it as a consistent feature of their incarceration. The official documentation does not acknowledge it as occurring. The consistency of the description across former inmate accounts from different facilities, different sentences, and different decades makes the gap between the two bodies of testimony particularly notable. Japanese prison labor is officially described as vocational training and rehabilitation programming. Former inmates consistently describe the actual nature of the work as different from this characterization in ways the official account does not acknowledge. The specific descriptions include work quotas whose non-fulfillment produces consequences not documented in official labor programming descriptions, work conditions whose physical demands exceed what the rehabilitation characterization implies, and the use of labor assignment as a management tool whose operation the official framework does not acknowledge. Officials describe prison labor as vocational programming, providing work skills and structured daily activity. International human rights standards distinguish between legitimate rehabilitation-oriented prison labor and forced or coercive labor. Former Japanese inmates describe specific features of the work programming they experienced that align with the coercive category in international standards frameworks. Officials describe the programming as falling within the legitimate rehabilitation category. Both descriptions are produced consistently. Former inmates consistently describe an informal hierarchical structure within Japanese prisons that operates alongside the official administrative structure. Specifically, they describe the use of senior inmates as unofficial management agents, inmates who enforce behavioral norms among other inmates with the awareness and tacit approval of institutional staff, whose enforcement methods include forms of pressure that the official disciplinary framework does not acknowledge as institutional practice. Officials describe inmate management as conducted entirely through the official administrative and disciplinary framework. The use of prisoner hierarchies as informal management instruments is documented in prison system literature globally. Former Japanese inmates describe a specific version of this practice, the consistency of their descriptions, the specific role of senior inmates, the specific forms of enforcement they employ, the specific awareness and approval of institutional staff, makes the gap between official denial and former inmate account particularly significant. Former inmates consistently describe the final week before release as a distinct institutional period, with specific characteristics not described in official release preparation documentation. The descriptions include intensified behavioral monitoring with consequences for minor infractions that would not produce the same consequences at other points in the sentence, specific communications from staff about post-release expectations that the official framework does not describe as part of release preparation, and a specific atmosphere in the final week that former inmates describe as designed to communicate something about the institution's continuing presence in their post-release life. Officials describe release preparation as a standard administrative process following official procedures. The consistency of the final week description across former inmate accounts, the specific intensification, the specific staff communications, the specific atmosphere, makes it one of the more distinctive patterns in the former inmate testimony that diverges most clearly from official characterization. Former Japanese death row inmates and those who have spent time in facilities containing death row consistently describe the specific atmospheric conditions of the death row section as designed to maximize psychological uncertainty. The descriptions include complete prohibition on information about execution schedules, deliberate variation in the morning routine on execution days that makes the beginning of every morning potentially the last morning, and the specific way in which the notification of execution is delivered that former inmates describe as the defining feature of death row existence. Officials describe death row conditions as humane and consistent with the rights of condemned inmates. The UN Human Rights Committee has directly questioned Japan about death row conditions, specifically regarding the non-notification of execution dates. Japan's responses characterize the system as humane. Former death row inmates who survived due to sentence commutation describe an experience that they characterize as incompatible with humane. The United Nations Human Rights Committee, in its periodic reviews of Japan's compliance with the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, has asked Japan directly about conditions in its detention and prison facilities. Japan has responded. The responses characterize conditions as compliant. The committee has asked again. Japan has responded again. The characterization has not changed. What the committee keeps asking about is not secret. It is in the public record of each periodic review. The specific conditions the committee returns to, the interrogation conditions, the isolation practices, the death row notification system, the medical access, are the same conditions that appear in former inmate testimony. The committee is asking because former inmate accounts, legal practitioner documentation, and international human rights observer reports have made those questions necessary. Japan's answer is always compliance. The accounts that made the questions necessary have not changed. The committee keeps asking. Japan keeps answering. The gap between the two bodies of testimony has not closed in 40 years of periodic review.